The quiet afternoon sun fell over Moses Lake, Washington, casting long shadows across the streets. To the casual observer, life moved at its usual pace. Fishermen on the docks, children running across lawns, and cars rolling down the avenues. But on this seemingly ordinary Sunday, November 3rd, the surface calm hit a storm that would rip through a family and expose the dark undercurrents lurking behind familiar faces. Officers patrolling downtown noticed a truck. Not just any truck, but one matching a report of a stolen vehicle logged mere hours earlier. What started as a routine investigation would spiral into an unthinkable nightmare as police units converged. Little did they know that inside this vehicle sat a man who would soon become central to a story that blended tragedy, betrayal, and the terrifying reality of human frailty. The driver, 27-year-old Isaiah Thomas, a former wide receiver for Eastern Oregon University, was known in town as a professional athlete, disciplined, focused, someone who had once captivated audiences with his agility and strength on the field. But here he was, in a stolen truck, or so it seemed, armed, tense, and oddly disoriented. Officers approached with caution. Ammunition lay in plain sight on the passenger seat, suggesting the situation could escalate at any moment. "Step out of the vehicle," one officer instructed, the weight of uncertainty hanging in the air. The tension was palpable, every movement under scrutiny. Then recognition flickered across the officer's eyes. Alvarado, a familiar face from high school, realized he was dealing with someone he had once called a peer. Star athlete now stood before him, unraveled, a stark contrast to the confident, focused young man he remembered. As Alvarado attempted to piece together what was happening, they called Isaiah's mother, Cassie Thomas. Her voice, calm and measured, conveyed information that shifted the investigation's trajectory. Isaiah's grandfather, Richard, had lent him the truck. The supposed theft was a misunderstanding, but something was wrong. Isaiah's behavior hinted at deeper issues, and Alvarado's instincts told him that this encounter was merely a prelude to something much darker. Released from the immediate scrutiny of the law, Isaiah drove away, but the shadows of suspicion followed him. Across town, the family was already grappling with fears that something unimaginable had occurred. Richard Andrews, 75 years old, was missing. His absence had been noted for over a day, and whispers of concern began to stir. Officers arrived at the family home, greeted by daughters and relatives, each revealing pieces of a puzzle that refused to make sense. Conversations were tense, fragmented by uncertainty and the faint scent of dread. Anthony, Isaiah's father, and other family members would soon become embroiled in a situation none could have foreseen. At Richard's shop, moments of revelation began to unfold. Buried in a shallow grave, partially concealed under soil and a tarp, lay the body of the elderly man. The first to see him, his daughter Kim, recoiled at the sight of a life so abruptly and violently ended. Shock rippled through the deputies, their training insufficient to brace against the raw horror of the scene. Family members began pointing fingers, the air thick with accusations and mistrust. Isaiah's name was whispered more than once, the very notion sending waves of fear and confusion through everyone present, yet no direct evidence tied him to the crime. The chaotic scene mirrored the chaos within the family, a mix of grief, suspicion, and unanswered questions. Investigators noted subtle details: burnt debris scattered across the lawn, signs of intentional destruction, and the yard meticulously altered to appear untouched. The cleanup extended into Richard's home. Strong bleach scents, wiped surfaces, blood mist on door handles, and a knife still bearing traces of red stains. Every observation painted a portrait of methodical intent, but the perpetrator's identity remained cloaked in uncertainty. Isaiah, now detained, refused to cooperate, his mental state a labyrinth of turmoil and defense mechanisms. His shoes, dirt-stained and flecked with possible dried blood, hinted at a proximity to the crime scene, yet offered no definitive conclusion. Meanwhile, family members, strained by tension and fear, began forming their own narratives, suspecting each other, and turning over every shadow of doubt in search of someone to blame. Rumors emerged of Isaiah's past, episodes of violent psychosis, impulsivity, and paranoia, all compounded by head trauma sustained during his time on the football field. Whispers of prior violent acts, covered up by parents, circulated in hushed tones. Every revelation compounded the complexity of a case that was as psychological as it was criminal. In interviews, family members painted contrasting pictures of the young man. Anthony spoke of prolonged marijuana use and repeated hits to the head during his athletic career, creating a volatile mix of paranoia and instability. Kim's perspective highlighted violent tendencies, unpredictability, and a fear that if Isaiah were ever free again, tragedy might strike once more. Detectives continued their meticulous work. They found themselves walking a tightrope between evidence and conjecture. Each revelation demanded scrutiny. Each familial account required cross-examination. And yet, the truth remained frustratingly elusive, hidden beneath layers of personal history, mental illness, and human complexity. The narrative took another twist when the tarp used to wrap Richard's body, belonging to a family member named Greg, raised the possibility of a deliberate framing. The investigation's trajectory blurred, as suspicion was no longer confined to a single actor. Relationships, history, and motives intertwined, creating a web that was as dangerous to navigate as it was emotionally charged. Hours of interviews, revisited crime scenes, and forensic analysis culminated in a slow, painful accumulation of facts. Blood-stained knives, dirt-laden clothing, and subtle inconsistencies in timelines built a case that was far from straightforward. Investigators were forced to consider every angle, every potential complicity, while managing a family whose internal dynamics complicated every step forward. Isaiah's mental state remained central. Episodes of mania, paranoia, and defensive aggression made him both a suspect and a vulnerable individual whose own actions were shaped by forces beyond simple morality. Conversations with family members revealed a pattern of missed interventions, warnings unheeded, and escalating tensions that had reached a catastrophic breaking point. As days passed, autopsy results confirmed the violent nature of Richard's death: severe knife wounds, blunt force trauma, and bruising that suggested a struggle. Yet the identity of the perpetrator was, at times, shadowed by conflicting accounts and procedural delays. The investigation became a test of patience, persistence, and perceptiveness as officers pieced together a sequence of events that culminated in a tragedy no one fully anticipated. Weeks later, a breakthrough came from the jail, where Isaiah's fellow inmates described erratic behavior, violent outbursts, and confessions that aligned with the known evidence. While this information was colored by self-interest and survival, it provided crucial insight into the psychology and potential culpability of Isaiah Thomas. 2 weeks later, he pled guilty to second-degree murder and unlawful disposal of human remains, receiving a 20-year sentence with mandatory mental health treatment. Despite the guilty plea, mysteries lingered. Questions remained about familial complicity, prior incidents, and the untapped depths of Isaiah's behavior. Investigators had reached a conclusion, but the emotional and moral complexities of the case continued to resonate, leaving echoes of uncertainty and unease. And yet, even as Isaiah was sentenced, the story refused to settle. There were whispers of old, unresolved cases, rumors of what might have been overlooked, and subtle inconsistencies in recollections that hinted at deeper truths still buried. The family, the investigators, and the town itself were left to grapple with the tension between justice served and justice deferred, with questions that demanded answers. As the final chapter appeared to close, a final shadow loomed. Unanswered questions, cryptic behaviors, and the subtle suggestion that the full scope of events was far from known hinted at a conclusion that was anything but absolute. Somewhere, beyond the confines of prison walls and courtroom records, secrets remained, a truth that might yet emerge, shocking everyone who thought they had witnessed the whole story. The investigation, though officially concluded, left a lingering tension. Was Isaiah truly acting alone? Were there unseen forces, silent accomplices, or past events shaping this violent crescendo? The answers, for now, remained tantalizingly out of reach, inviting further scrutiny, reflection, and perhaps eventual revelation. And as the camera pans out metaphorically from Moses Lake, one question hangs in the air: in a family defined by loyalty, fear, and secrecy, what other truths remain hidden, waiting for the day they finally come to light? The story is far from over,